And I'm going to say good morning. Happy, I don't know, whatever of July. It's after July 4th. That's all I know. I hope everyone had a fabulous July 4th and survived the weekend. And I know that I had a wonderful time on the lake. I literally was on the lake from the sun up to sundown. It was amazing. Had no cell service at all in the middle of the lake. It was fabulous. I got a little sunshine, little sunshine. It was great. And there's no alligators in Tennessee. So we did a lot of swimming and it was awesome. And you pull up, you eat, and then you go somewhere else, you pull up and you guess what? You eat some more. Jesus Lord, I probably gained 5 pounds. No, no, it was a lot of fun. So I hope you all had a great time. And just to remind you all, Wednesday, we have Heather and Chris Musto doing our 2-1 buy down class at 10. It's a Zoom. I think it's at 10. Pretty sure it's at 10. I do everything at 10. So I just wanted to remind you that we have that. It's going to be a great class this week. So look out for that one. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about all things contracts today, because I really want to make sure we have a lot of questions answered. So if anybody has any, let's see, questions to get us started, but what I'm going to do is hop right into templates. And I want to make sure that everyone who was not at the meeting on Monday knows that there was a new condo rider. So everybody is aware or is not, in our condo listing folder is the new condominium rider A, right? And if you missed that, I did not record it because I couldn't, because I had to log into Florida Realtors Zoom, and they have something where everybody has to log in with your own login on Florida Realtors, but their Zoom should be up this week for sure. So you can log into Florida Realtors and go see that Zoom. Okay, if you want to make sure to view it there, and that way you can see that. But basically, these are the biggest changes that we can discuss very briefly. I want to go over it if everyone's okay with that. You have any questions, let me know. But there's some really great changes that are already in effect in terms of condominiums. Okay, and so let's talk about some of them. Now, a couple of the biggest things are now the condominiums that are 22 members. I believe it's 22, right? Maria, it's 22, right? 22 members or larger are required to have all of the required documents. And let's go to see what those required documents are. They're listed right here. And they tell us articles of incorporation, association bylaws, rules of the associations, copy of the most recent annuals right here. Annual financial statement, annual budget, frequently asked questions, answers to their questions, but it also includes, not to forget, if there is a turnover study, the milestone inspection, and the structural integrity reserve study. All of those items must be listed on their website. Hallelujah. So your seller can't be like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I never saw it. So don't know, don't tell is no longer a thing. I mean, now they have to, they have access to it. Now they could give you their password and you can log in. It doesn't really matter, but they have to have that. That is a new thing and we love that. So that's a great new report that is out there. Okay. Another big thing I would say, and again, you can go through it, you can watch the video. There is a red line version of all of the changes. The biggest thing I think is that beforehand you used to have 3 days to go through the condominium docs, and now you have 7. 7 days right of refusal. That is a big one. So that is an important thing. Now remember, the other new change, let's go down here. When you get all of these reports, right? And it says that the buyer is acknowledging that they've received it or that they are requesting it. You see this down here? I'm still letting people in. Well, the problem is they may want more information. Maybe they want to know about the parking spots. That can open up your 7-day right of refusal. This is something new and wonderful that has been changed. I'm using that a little bit tongue in cheek, I'm going to say, because it's wonderful if you're representing the buyer. If you're representing the seller, maybe not so new and wonderful. Now, I would like to think that we will not have a lot of slim, shady people out there using this to their benefit. I would tell you investors probably will find ways to do so. Because back in the day when I sold condos for the builder, I'm going to tell you, they used to go into contract all over the place and then try to say, oh, I never got this part of the HOA docs or something, condo docs, and then go ahead and try to get out of the contract at the last minute because they would buy multiple ones and then decide at the last minute which ones they wanted. Could I see that happening again? Sure. Yes, I could. And this really does allow for that. So to be very clear, you could say buyer has received and acknowledged that they've gotten all their documents, but then request more information. And that request of information literally could open up the 7-day right of refusal. And I would not want to be the person on the other side trying to fight that. I'm just going to say. So you have to be very careful about that. So just so you know, there's also another section, and I never heard that a multiple parcel building was also a condotel. That's the weirdest name. I'd never heard that, but this is also essentially included in a condotel now. So this is interesting. I didn't think that condotels really had anything to do with the reserve studies, or because basically you're only buying fractionally when you think about it in a condo. Well, not necessarily, but it is really the same thing. You have the condo, elements, but you don't own the elements really in a condotel outright. That's the difference with a regular condo, right? In a regular condo, you don't own necessarily the ground below you because you own shares in the association that owns the ground below you. You own from sheetrock in, sheetrock out, the roof, all that. Common elements is owned by the association that you own shares in the association. Well, it's different in the condotel, right? So, but this is talks a little bit about the disclosure summary on the difference between the ownership of the condotel and the ownership of a condominium. So I do think that's good. It explains that, but I just never heard it called a multiple parcel building. I thought that was totally bizarre, but that's what it's referring to. Any other big changes that I can't remember?
No living space on the ground floor garages.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's a new one. So the 3-story rule basically now says that includes, even if you have no living space on the ground floor, they're counting that in as the no living space. So that's bizarre because that's going to really change the number of units this could be affected in.
You can have 3 stories, but it's not 3 stories.
Yeah. It could be like a 2-story with a garage below, but now they're considering that the 3-story, right? Because, I mean, they're not considering that a 3-story, rather. Thank you very much. I said that backwards. I still haven't drank my coffee because there's nobody living below, right? But it's just a garage.
But it's still 3 stories.
But it's still a 3-story. So you'd think structurally you should really be maintaining that. But they're saying, oh no, there's no like inhabitable things below. Well, it's still, you have the footers, you still have to have the building, but for the sake of the milestone report, it's 3 stories of inhabitable space.
Yeah, 3 stories.
So really, if the first floor is a garage, they're considering it would be a 4-story, like if we were looking at it, right? To count for the milestone report. Not the reserve study, right? But the milestone report, because it's a building of 3 stories or more. And remember, it's every 30 years, unless you're within, I think it's 2 to 3 miles from the water. And my understanding is that each ordinance, so if you're a city or a county or, wherever you are, they can also change. So if it was said, 3, they could say, no, we want 2. So they can adjust. They could put kind of like a bank can put an overlay. So can the city or the ordinance that the building is in. So they maybe have a lot more erosion by the water, and they may say, we want it to be even further from the water. We want it to be 3 miles out because we know with the way our winds are and the way our erosion patterns are, it's going to be affecting a little further out. So just know if you do any business along the coast, check with if the city or the county or whatever those particular units are in to see if they've changed that, because those milestone reports could be required a little bit further from the water. You don't know, or closer to the water. That is going to be per the area that it's located in.
And I didn't really catch when he said it, and I think about it now. I didn't catch whether he really specified, what if there's 2 levels of garages and then
Well,
2 levels.
you know what? So Maria said she didn't catch whether he said 2 levels of garage and 2 levels of living, but he did say inhabitable space. So he didn't actually clarify 2 levels of garage, but I would clarify that because
Yeah.
2 levels of garage is not inhabitable living.
Right.
So
in theory,
it could be 2 levels of garage and then you have to start counting. So really, I mean,
Yeah.
it is really horrifying because what if you had 2 levels of garage and then the building started? Now you have to be, instead of 4 stories, 5 stories. Well, that, guys, every time you go up a floor, there's a footer that gets larger and larger into the ground. And that's really what gets eaten away and makes the structure that much more susceptible to the elements and all those things. And that's really what they're really checking for, you know, amongst other things, right? But in that milestone study, a lot of that structure is the footer. I know when we built the condominiums in Baldwin Park, and that's not by the water, and that's not by, it's in the middle of Orlando, right? But of course, we also did concrete, not only in the sides, but in the flooring. So it was a really heavy building. Our footers were so huge. And, you know, we only went 3 stories high.
You don't have bedrock to tie into.
We don't have bedrock and our water table is so low. Imagine, I mean, you're gonna, some of these buildings go so high up. How far do those footers go down? I mean, that's kind of terrifying, which is why you think about how these buildings crumble. I mean, it's kind of a scary thought. So just to keep that in mind, it's what it is. It's not just always the structure of the actual wall. A lot of the time it's the structure of the footer that is tying into the ground that's holding the building up. So anyway, any questions on, now you want to make sure if you pull it from our files, they're all in here, but it is the CR7, it's updated as of June 2025. So you just want to make sure that you are using the most updated condominium rider form. Everybody good with that? Any questions? I think those are the big hits. There was a couple, maybe other little minor tweets,
They
but
sent out the slides.
Yeah.
Days ago. but-
and on
Yes.
Florida Realtors is the red lines. And trust me, don't get scared. There's a lot of red, but a lot of it's also little languages that they cleaned up some things and they, you know, took out a couple extra words that didn't make sense and things of that nature. So, you know, a lot of that stuff is good.
Easier to look at.
Yeah, like actually they cleaned up this part, which is nice. And this is buyer request for documents. This whole section's new, sorry. This is where the buyer can say after the fact
Blanks.
that there's blanks that they're requesting to know maybe about if dogs are allowed to, you know, stay or do a dog park or whatever. I mean, they
What
can
is the
request.
DNA composition of the grass in the common area?
Yeah, exactly. They can ask whatever they want. And this is agendas for all condominiums. Oh, that's the other thing. They used to have that the seller would have to go through the last year of the minutes. They don't have that anymore. The seller does not have to go through the last year of minutes because now everything is being posted. Remember, unless it's 22 members or more, posted to that website that each association has to maintain. However, it can be right here requested by the buyer. And it can be even more specifically requested. They can request, did you discuss any potential changes to paint or to, I mean, they can request whatever they want. And this will, again, open up that 7-day right of refusal.
Oh, the no
Hey,
longer.
Carrie,
Yes, Jules.
so the HOA minutes and the website, is that as of January 2026 or is it effective immediately?
I wish it was effective immediately. The minute at the websites, they said by January, because I think it may take some of these associations to January to get it going. So yes, that is, thank you, good point, that they will have those association website. Now, if these associations already have websites, I'm sure you will find many complying prior to that, but the actual date required to have it done by is January. I think January 1st, wasn't it 2026? I think it was January 1st, 2026. But all of these other like 7-day rule, the requesting of these things, this all begins as of the 5th. I think it was the 5th of July, wasn't it?
It was the next day after you, so.
Yeah,
Literally the next day.
oh, yeah, no, so maybe the 1st of July, I think. I think it was the 1st of July. But yes, great point, Jules. But many, remember, they did have this rule. I think they had to be associations 100 members or more that already had the associations. Now they've changed it, 22 members or larger. So there were already associations that were required to have websites. What they've done is they've just made it now a requirement for associations that are even smaller. And they've added what they need to upload because they didn't have the same requirement as to what needed to be uploaded. They just said your documents. They were very vague. Now they're specifically stating what needs to be uploaded on it. And they're also added to it like the milestone reports and the reserve studies and all of that. That has been all added to what needs to be on that website. So those are the changes. I hope that answered it. Shane?
Yes, thank you.
Shane?
Hey, yeah, quick question. So if we already have an active condo listing, do we need to have these forms updated with these new ones, or are we good just
Yes.
for new
No,
listings?
update them because
Okay.
unless it's already sold and you're going to closing, that's a different story. But if it's currently active, change them.
Got it. Thank you.
Great question. Anybody else on this, or should we move on? Do we kill the condo to death, or is it? Because like, let's say you're just active on the market and your old forms will say 3-day right of rescission. See, that's wrong. It's now 7 days. And that's, I mean, and this whole buyer request for documents and all this is new. So you have to make sure it's applicable. Any other questions, guys? Oh, one thing I want to remind you, and they did talk about this, and this is another good thing that they broke out here. This is very important. There are different types of associations, management companies for different associations. So for example, I'm going to use Baldwin Park. Where we did the condominiums, each different group had its own condo association. And then in Baldwin Park, you had to be part of the Master Homeowner Association. So in this instance, they had, and you would fill out for each association, the information of the contact, the management. Now, if it was a condo and then a homeowner's, in that instance, you would do this one for the condo association, and then you would include a homeowners association for the Baldwin Park Master Association. You following me? Because the master association is a homeowners association, which is different than a condominium association. However, I cannot think off the top of my head, but there is some very weird instances where people belong to 2 condominium associations. God help you. Thank God, I don't think I've seen many of them, but there is, on the very rare chance that you ever get that, you will have to fill out 2 of these, okay, just so you know. But I can't think of any off the top of my head, thank God.
What
Because
would be the scenario?
I think because it was in different phases and then they annexed them. Yeah, it's just like it's very rare, very odd, but it's usually older ones that were in different phases and then they were rebought and then annexed together, but they didn't change the associations because, yeah, and because you and I both know zoning is such a nightmare, so to rezone them, it was just easier to keep them in 2 associations. Typically, you would have a master condo association that actually managed it, but in the very weird instance that for some reason they, God knows, have crazy people running them, you would have to do 2. Okay. But just so you know, that has happened. It's usually in the older ones, or sometimes, let's say you had a condo conversion and then the condo conversion got annexed into a larger project.
Oh, yeah.
That could have happened there too. But it's very rare. And I wouldn't say it's something that I may have seen once or twice. Very bizarre thing. But, Avalon Park, Baldwin Park, Celebration, Laureate Park, these larger communities, you would have a condominium association and then a separate document for homeowners association, because you have a master homeowners association and a condominium association. Those are 2. Everybody good on that? Okay. All right, great. So we're going to get out of condominium. That's the biggest change, and that went in effect. So we're all good on that. We also want to make sure that when they are filling in the seller's disclosure, and I'm just going to bring this up and I want to look for it. Here it is. Number 1, that they are using It's still from 2024. I didn't see an updated one. I don't know if they will change one, but make sure that they're using the seller's property disclosure for condominium. I still sometimes see people using the wrong one. And it doesn't matter, even if it's like a Baldwin Park or a Laureate Park, you don't need two. You just need whatever type of residence it is. So if it's a condominium, they have to use seller's disclosure for condominium. Does that make sense? Even if it's in a homeowners association as well, it doesn't matter. What type of unit is it? If it's a townhouse, then it's a regular seller's disclosure. But if it is a condominium, now some people say, well, it's really, it looks like a condo, but it's really a villa, but it's really, you have to see what the ownership type is. If it's owned, like there's that one in, I don't know if it's Windermere or Winter Garden. It's that one that they tried to always say it was townhouse, but it really is a condo and they always had trouble selling it. I don't know if it was Pulte. Yeah, but there was a weird one like that. It doesn't matter what they say, what they call it. And it's always weird because in MLS, it's listed a billion ways. Some people say townhouse, some people will say villa, some people will say condo. Your job is to look and see how it is written in the legal description. You have to see how they have deeded this thing. If it is deeded as a condo, you need to use condo rider A and you need to use seller's property disclosure for condominium because I don't care how they treat it internally, it means that it is actually a condo. And that is what you need to sell it as. Okay. And the reason this one is super important because obviously when we get into things like, let's get over here, the association. You have to have this page filled in about the association. Any proposed changes to the association's governing documents. That's important, right? Do they propose to materially change the common elements? Any legal action that is threatened against the association? Has there ever been involved in litigation? These are all things. And if you don't know, say you don't know, but don't ever just write on here, person never lived there. That does not protect your seller. And I will say it one more time. I say it all the time. When we go to Florida Realtors Board of Directors meeting, the number one, every time I go, amount of lawsuits is always for lack of disclosure. And so this, if you just write on here, I never lived here, that is lack of disclosure. Just because you didn't live there, and especially now with these websites, they are informed. It's the sellers, they're the members of the association. We are not. And it's their job to know what's going on. Just because they put their head in the sand does not relinquish them of their duty of knowing what's going on and to inform the person purchasing it. So even if they don't know, they have a job to pass on whatever's on that thing, whatever's on the website, whatever's there. They need to ask these questions. And at the very least, they need to say, don't know. But they can't just write on the bottom of the thing, never lived here. And you have to explain to them, I would definitely and you don't fill it in. They have to fill this in and they have to definitely take their time and you have to explain to them, this is for your protection. This is going to help you because if you don't fill something in and they feel like you should have known it, should have known is called culpable negligence. That is the number one thing that people get sued for, even if they didn't know, but they should have known because they were a member. And guess what happens? They're going to say, well, it was mailed to you. Oh, well, I was living there. Yeah, your address is this. Isn't this where you live currently? Guess what? How do you get out of that?
You're the landlord, you paid the bill to have the roof.
Exactly.
There to pay the bill.
So here's the point. You just got to make sure that and if they don't know, don't have them say yes or no. Have them say, don't know. Don't ever guess because that is even worse. But definitely make sure that you're getting this answered to the best of their ability, but don't guess, but better to say don't know. And notice that they have all on here, the milestone and structural reserve study. Again, the beautiful thing here is you're going to have it now to give to the other side for their review. And they now have the 7 days to review it, right? So all of that is in here. And I'm going to say, as we talked about last week in the social media, people don't want to buy condos because they're scared of the milestone study and they're scared of the new assessments. So that's the stuff you got to know about, and that's what you should be advertising on. Great news, clean milestone report, and great, and there's no assessments or assessments paid by seller or whatever that is. That's the stuff you should be yelling from the hilltops, because that's why people aren't buying. They're scared about that. And why wouldn't they be, right? Because nobody knows what the heck's going on. So this is what I'm going to say. You have to know, and you can't, I mean, you have no business selling condominiums if you don't know this stuff. Now, that doesn't mean plenty of people are telling them and don't know any of this stuff. It just means they have no business doing it. And unfortunately, that just makes it a little bit harder for us. But the good news is, once these websites are more informed, then we could say, go to your website and get it, because they have to. It's on the condominium rider. Okay. Now, one bad thing, and this has happened so many times. What happens if they don't give it to us? The only recourse the buyer has is to cancel. We cannot force. We could try to contact the association. We could try to do what we can do. But other than that, we cannot force it. And we cannot contact the seller ourselves, because that's a code of ethics violation. So just to be clear on that, this has come up many times, and people say, Carrie, what else can I do? The answer is, unfortunately, if the agent on the other side is useless, we've all seen that. What else can you do? You just have to tell your buyer, this is all you can do. You have a choice. You either go in it blindly or you cancel. Shane.
Sorry, I have one more question.
No,
So if we have a two-story condo, is it subject to any kind of studies, or is it like only one of the two?
the reserve
Does that make
study.
Huh?
Reserve study.
Only the reserve study for a
Yes.
two-story. Okay, just not the milestone.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, now notice it talks about FERPTA. I want to bring up just an interesting an interesting question. I'm trying to remember who brought it up. It was so funny. What an interesting one we had. We had a foreign seller who wanted to 1031 like-kind exchange their property. Can anyone just think about that for a second? How could you 1031 like-kind exchange your property if you're foreign? Because what's the concept? Does anybody understand, right? FERPTA, what do? They withhold the money so that you pay your taxes, right? Everybody with me with that? What does 1031 like-kind exchange do? It takes the gain, right? And it moves it to a different property so you don't have to pay your taxes. The concept is, really, if you do it well, you could constantly move that gain from property to property and maybe never have to pay the gain, right? But if you're doing that, did you ever pay your taxes? No. And so do you think the IRS is going to be like, no problem, they didn't pay their taxes, right? So this is the problem with the FERPTA mixed with the 1031 like-kind exchange. So they cannot 1031 the FERPTA part. They could withhold the 15%. And then if there is beyond that monies, they could probably 1031 that. That's a lot of gain. Good for you if you happen to have that. But you cannot FERPTA away and 1031 kind of exchange with the rest of the FERPTA. It doesn't mix. Everybody with me on that one? I mean, I did think, and by the way, this was a Sotheby's referral from one Sotheby's, and that's what the advisor down there was saying, that, oh yeah, just 1031 like kind of exchange it. And my advisor was like, but it's a FERPTA. And they're like, oh yeah, you could do that. So we did call our FERPTA, and they're like, no, you'd have to pay the FERPTA. And then if there was additional funds, you could potentially 1031 that. But yeah, you see what I'm saying though, why that wouldn't work, right? Because, and this is why if you're the buy side, you never allow your buyer to waive the withholding. Because if the seller does not pay those taxes, the property then becomes liable for those taxes. And the IRS does not just go, oh, well, it's just another one bites the dust. No, someone's going to pay the piper, and they're going to slap a bill on that property, which we've seen happen. And when that happens, it's really not pretty for the buyer who bought it, right? Because they're like, why do I suddenly have a tax bill on my home, right? So this is the thing. So yeah, just wanted to cover that because that was a real fun one that came up recently. All right. Any questions about condos? I think we've kind of covered all with condos. Shane, you don't have your hand up, right? That was like an old hand. Okay. I want to go into just one more time because I think it's super important that we get this right. If you guys have any other questions or things that you want me to cover, stop me. But I have the list of things that I know are important or the list of things that I see questions on a lot. Oh, I want to say one thing about MLS came up this weekend. There's rules in MLS for a reason that they don't penalize us on. So MLS requires that everything in the MLS is business. Oh, one other thing, that was bizarro. Condominium rider, 7-day right of refusal is business days. Bizarre. Because every other contract is calendar days. So I just want you to know that because totally weird. I don't know why they would have done that. It's like, let's throw you guys completely off now because you're so used to everything being in the contract, calendar days, and everything in MLS is business days. But now let's just throw you for a loop and give you the business days on the first right of refusal for the condo. Yeah, super fun. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out to you too, because I was like, that was the dumbest thing they could have ever done. But thank you for that. So back to the MLS. MLS is business days, right? Pending. The rule to pend is 2 business days. Okay. So if there's a holiday like the 4th of July, right? We don't have to pend. Let's say you wrote a contract on Thursday. It doesn't have to pend until Tuesday, right? But if you want to get credit for that it's sold on Thursday, we go ahead when we pend it and put it for Thursday. Because the rule is that it doesn't have to pend for 2 days, we can actually put the actual contract date that it pended when we actually penned it. Now, we can't put the week before, right? Because that's outside of the rules. As long as we're within the rules of the 2 business days, we can pend back to the 2 business days. You just can't pend back to the week before because they'd be like, nice try, Carrie. Like that doesn't work, right? You can't do that. Trust me, we've tried. No, I'm just kidding. Haven't tried that, but maybe we could. No, but we do that all the time because, we want to make sure, which we know how important days on market for everybody because we use that in our marketing. So just want to be very clear. A lot of you too, like the clear cooperation, not that we always post date it and all that, but that one is that you have 5 business days to get into the MLS after either the date on the front or the date everybody signs, right? It's 5, not 7, right? I'm 5. For a brief moment, I'm like having a momentary lapse. So the point is that's 5 business days. So if you're like, oh my gosh, the date's coming up, don't panic. 5 business days is actually a really long time if you think about it because you have the weekend that doesn't count, right? It's business days. So don't ever worry about things like that, okay? And if we ever need to change it, which happens a lot, you could just come right here into your listing agreement, change this date, cross it out, and everybody could just initial it. So like, let's say something was in private placement or we just post dated it, but maybe pictures took a little longer or whatever it was, you could just change it, cross it out, change the date, have all parties initial, you're fine. You could do a listing modification, which we're going to look at. If you want to be super fancy, you could be a fancy pants, not really necessary. Okay. A lot of times I like to say less is more. And the less you get the seller thinking that they can modify, the better. So if you send them a listing modification and they start reading that thing, they might go, "Ooh, what else can I change?" Yeah. See, we don't like them thinking they can start changing things. So just a little change on the date here, because we know that we want to take longer because they want to paint something else or whatever, not a big deal, right? So this is why I like oftentimes for minor changes like that. I hate crossouts. I don't like messy, but that little messy I like better than a listing modification change. And that's why I like it better. Everybody clear on that? Because people are like, well, what is better? That one I think is better than a listing modification change. I think, Keith, you asked me that question, right? I think it was you. No? Okay, somebody else. I don't know. I can't keep it straight. Okay, anyway, any questions about that? You can ask me. All right. Let us talk about the most important one that I get a lot. This compensation. We're going to go over this one more time to make sure everybody is super clear because this is where the modifications are required. In case there's any question or need for clarity, I want us to be super clear. This number here, this little letter 8A, this is the total commission a seller will be paying. Now, I'm going to throw a loop at you. Let's say you're selling your house. Well, if you sell your house with us, your total commission is only what you're paying the buy side. You don't put the $1,500 marketing fee because you pay that after, right? And you also don't pay $395 because it's exempt because it's your personal property. So in that case, you could cross this out. That is the only time I suggest that you ever cross that out. Because if you cross it out on other times, now we think the seller doesn't understand that and you're going to end up paying it. So you don't want to ever cross that out. But if you're the seller, it's okay. Does that make sense? Okay.
What about VA and under 100,000?
VA and under 100,000 also okay. Thank you. But in general, people start getting a little bit crazy crossing stuff out and it's a little bit scary, but yes, true story. VA and under 100,000 are also exempt. Also commercial. Those are exemptions. But so this is the total amount. So let's go to a regular deal. And let's say the seller says, I hate it, but let's say he says 5%. But he says, okay, I am going to say we're going to pay 2% to the buyer's broker, because you're getting 3, right? So you check A, because we're going to be giving it out to the buyer's broker, and we write 2%. Everybody with me? Now, would we ever pick B? Anybody? In our listing agreement.
I'm listing only if I'm modifying at that point, because we negotiate. I can't think of another benefit.
We're not going to pick B because B means, listen, Mr. Seller, I tell you that I'm full service, but really you're on your own, man. I'm not helping you. That's really what I'm saying, right? I'm saying, dude, I like it, but not very much. You're going to be on your own. I don't really care. Good luck to you. That's what I'm saying. I mean, essentially, right? Kind of what I'm saying. And C says, I'm not going to fight with you. I don't really care. I'm going to hope you change your mind and I'm going to really try to sell your house. But am I? I don't really know because I don't know who's going to want to put in an offer if I tell you you're not even negotiable. C does not really help you very much and it doesn't really help the seller. So to me, I would say, so Daphne, I understand you don't want to pay commission. Is that correct? Well, I'm just going to share with you just something fun since this whole lawsuit thing came out. People were always used to having the seller pay it, but really in truth, they were paying for it, weren't they? Because it was included in the price of the house. So what happens is they put it in the price that they want. So instead of you being in control like you were before, they become in control. So you say, okay, fine, I'm not going to include it, but you're going to end up paying it anyway, except you don't get to choose, they do. So we always say, sometimes it's better to be in control, isn't it? So let me ask you, do you think it'd be worth it to pay 3% to get a full price offer? So would be, right? So we like to think, what if we say 3% to a full price offer? Would you feel good about that? And then if the offer doesn't come in where you want it, it's negotiable. Why don't we start there? Fabulous. So we write 3. You follow me? But it's up to you guys. You do whatever you want. But if they say, no, I'm not doing it, try your little fancy voodoo on someone else, Carrie. That's my husband. Then you'd say no compensation. Okay. If that was the case.
Hey, Carrie.
Yes.
Carrie, being as you brought up lawsuits, have you been hearing that there's now a class action buyer side lawsuit?
There's so many lawsuits. I was just reading about from Inman where they interviewed the president, and not the president of NAR. And, and actually there's been many settlements actually that had been very much to the same upsets. So I think that, they're going to continue to be a lot of lawsuits, Keith, but I don't think anything we need to be worried about. Personally, guys, let me just tell you, this is our new norm. People are going to be suing. Listen, this is a litigious society. It's been a litigious society. People try to sue us for everything, and whatever, they're going to continue to do whatever they want. But if we're doing the right thing, for example, we can say our professional service fee is 3%. Our professional service fee is, we cannot offer less than 2.5%. That's just, we don't accept that. And your choice is to either go with us or someone else. We are allowed to do that. We are allowed to say, I'm sorry, that's what our fees are because of all of our marketing. And guess what? You don't have to choose to work with us. Period. You can buy a Mercedes or you can buy a Mitsubishi. Which would you prefer? They both offer something that has 4 wheels and drives, right? Which would you want to get behind the wheel of? Your choice. Your choice. They both are going to get you from point A to point B, right? Doesn't matter. Everybody has a customer. You may be our customer and you may be the Mitsubishi customer. It doesn't really matter, right? Your choice. There's a lot of choices in between. It's irrelevant. What's more important to you? We believe the way we do business, and that's why we charge what we charge, because we believe you have to spend money to make money. You have to put the money in the marketing to get it in front of the most qualified people wherever they are. And those people are going to give you the highest and best value for your home. So at the end, you make more money. That's what we believe. But maybe you believe you pay a little money, you throw it in at the lowest price, you get as cheap as you can on that side, and maybe you get some money. Maybe you think time is money. I don't know. It's your choice. Do whatever you want, right? But that's the point, right? Everybody has a choice. So the buyers can do whatever they want. I don't know what they want to sue for. They want to sue because they want to buy a home for free. It's just like if the seller says, I don't want to work with an unrepresented buyer. They don't have to, and neither do you, but you got to get it directly from the seller. So that's why when you're in a listing presentation, make them tell you, I do not want to work with an unrepresented buyer. So when they come and try to put in their offer and say they want to be unrepresented, you can say, oh, I'm so sorry. The seller has chosen not to work with unrepresented buyers. And they can't say, well, that's against the law. So that's blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry. The seller is the owner of the home, and this is their directive. This is what they have chosen. Has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with you, has all to do with the seller wants to do with the sale of their home. Okay, period, end of story. You can take that to the bank. You can't do anything about that. Now, unless they say, I don't want to sell to you because you're from wherever, that's a problem. They can't say that. They can't talk about anything having to do with fair housing, right? But they certainly can say they don't want to take a price below a certain price. They can say they don't want to deal with an unrepresented buyer. And those are the things you need to figure out. And it's a great thing to add onto your listing agreement, by the way, at the time of the listing. Okay, back to this. So let's say we went with 5 here and 2 here. Everybody with me? Yeah? Okay. Now, you're in a negotiation. Maria submits an offer. She submits it at 3. And the seller's like, not feeling it. The offer wasn't quite what I wanted, but I'd be willing to do 2.5. Okay. So what do? Well, there's a couple things. We resubmit the compensation agreement because hers said 3. So we do the seller's broker to buyer's broker, this one. And we do it because ours had said 2. So we'll do this at 2.5%. Okay. Now, this one can be signed, even though it says seller's broker, buyer's broker. It can be initialed by you. We give you the authority. I do not need to sign it. You can. Okay. One other question I get all the time, they won't sign the arbitration. Listen, we want people to sign arbitration because the litigation costs are so dang expensive. But if they don't want to sign it, fine. Fine. We're not going to kill a deal because somebody won't sign arbitration, right? You want to litigate? We have attorneys. Trust me, we have many lawsuits going on right now. If I have to deal with one more problem, I don't even want to talk about it. Oh, wait, I'm dealing with one more problem. Got to talk about it right after this call. Super fun. But the point is, it's really to everybody's benefit to arbitrate. It's just much cheaper, quicker. It's a better way to deal with things. But most of the time people say that because they have no knowledge of what that even means. Whatever. And then broker or authorized. So this one actually says broker authorized and these don't, because honestly, I believe they didn't have room for seller or broker authorized. I think that's why they did it, right? Because it's just a little tiny space. So you can initial the whole thing. You don't need me to do it. But if you really are like, Carrie, these people are annoying, can you sign it? I don't care. I'll sign it. Okay. But this is what you'd change and you'd say 2.5. But now we have a problem because that listing agreement, as we know, said up here on compensation, a total agreement of 5. And if we don't do something, I guarantee in that seller's mind, he thinks he's paying 5 total. So if he's giving Maria 2.5, suddenly I'm no longer getting 3, I'm getting 2.5. No. I'm working too hard for that. Sorry, Maria. So I have to come in here and I want to go to my modification. And did I not put it into this file? But I did put it into my OA file.
So this is the time you do like the model.
This is when we like the modification. So here it is, modification to the listing agreement. This is for clarity between you and your sellers. And it simply says these two things right here under compensation. One, you're letting them know that right here, seller is authorizing the compensation to the buyer's broker, Maria, to be a total 2.5%. Because remember, to be paid by the broker, right? That initially he only wanted, or she only wanted to pay 2%. So he and she had changed their mind and are now paying 2.5, right? So that's one. But we also have to change this little doohickey to now 5.5 is the total. They have now essentially increased the amount they're willing to pay. And this is where I guarantee you might get, well, what? What's happened? What am I paying 5.5? I thought it was 5. But I would rather have this conversation now versus the closing table. Because you know what's going to happen at the closing table anyway? You're just going to cave and get the deal closed. At least now you have a fighting chance to negotiate, right? But you're not going to have any chance to negotiate at the closing table because you just want the dang thing to close. And honestly, if you didn't have it in writing, you have no chance because the total agreement was for 5. So before you execute anything, you get this executed at the same time. Because if you execute it all and then do this after, it's too late. Because, oh, I didn't understand it that way. So before you execute the agreement for him to do the deal, you execute this. And if they're like, oh, I didn't see it that way. Oh, well, then maybe you don't want to accept the 2.5. Let's talk about that, right? That's why this, in my opinion, needs to be negotiated first. Because they're very easy to give away your commission.
Yeah.
Very, very easy to give away your commission, which I think is super funny because, like, what are you getting on the house, right? Are you moving in? Like, everybody, the buyer wants to take your money, seller's happy to take your money. And I'm always like, well, wait a second. What are you doing on the deal? What are you getting out of this thing, right? Because last time I checked, you're the one working really hard, and half the time you're the one who's giving all the money. Yeah. So I've seen agents, thank God not usually my own, sometimes end up bringing money to the table to close the thing. Yes. And I'm like, I hope you're related, because if you're not, what did you just do? Yeah, it's painful. We've never done that, but well, can never say never. But anyway, so this is really important. So these are the 2 boxes that I really like. Now, what we never do, and I'm going to be very upfront here, and this is why I don't like to give this one right here. When we talk about, let's see here, cancellation, parties, broker, termination. Let's talk a little bit about this. And you guys do not, here it is. Broker and owner seller hereby agree to unconditionally terminate, or the parties agreed to conditionally terminate. Neither of these boxes. I do not want anybody to ever check either of these boxes and sign it. First of all, I will never process it, so the joke will be on you. You have to go back to your seller and tell them that you don't have the authority to do that because I will never approve that. And if there will ever be anything that gets passed, this one will never happen. Unconditionally terminate. Don't even come to me with that. It's never, ever going to happen. Let me say it again. I will never, ever unconditionally terminate a listing. Never. So that is never going to happen. And if I ever conditionally, it will only be done by me. And it will be only a very specific thing. And if I ever do anything, what I will do is terminate a listing early. But it will be me doing it, not you. So I never want anybody to do this. I will do that. Yes, Shane.
Why is it that we won't cancel? Because there's verbiage in the contract that we can get our expenses reimbursed if it is canceled.
Not canceled, conditionally terminate.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do it. I will never unconditionally terminate. And
No, I
there's
know,
no
but even
verbiage
if
in the
it's
contract for that.
but even if it's conditionally terminated, it
Mhm.
says that they have to reimburse us for our
Yeah.
direct
And
expenses.
sometimes I might do that, but I will do it. You guys can't, is what I'm saying.
Okay, because I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of my listing up in Okahumpka. Like I could have gotten reimbursed for everything that I put into that
Yeah.
listing.
Did they want to do that?
Yeah, you just told me to TOM it until it expires.
Right. But did they want to conditionally terminate it?
Yeah, they wanted to pull it off the market.
But it doesn't pull off the market when you conditionally terminate it. They still sit there in a conditional terminated state where it's just shown, just like TOM. Off
Right.
it. No one can do anything with it. It depends on what you want to do with your relationship, guys. Listen, there's two things. If you conditionally terminate, and we can do this in case by case scenario. If we conditionally terminate something, let me ask you how your people are going to feel. And we can do this. If we do this, we say you pay $1,500 to Sotheby's, whatever you write in your cancellation, we pull it off the market, we do nothing to it. It sits there until your listing expires. You think they feel good about that? I mean, we can. Do you think it's good for future business with them or referrals with them? So we can give them that option if they want to do it. It also depends on why we're doing it. Leave it on the market, TOM it if you think you can put it back on the market. It just depends on what we're doing. That's the thing. Oftentimes I might just say, we'll do it and then we'll write a new listing agreement. I mean, this just depends on what we're trying to do. I like to save relationships so that we can work with them again in the future. I'm going to tell you, the conditionally terminate never sits well with anybody. I have never had a good scenario with a seller. I mean, Jill, you remember that one guy who came driving over here totally pissed off with the $1,500 check, but he actually ended up reselling it with us, which was probably the first I've ever seen that, but he was so mad. Yeah, I've never seen that really. Oh, and that other lady who is Jane on? Oh my God, the drunk lady who came to Ocala with that check. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's never been a good scenario. So I on case by case basis, I mean, always talk to me if that's an option, but I've never known a seller to feel good about that one.
Okay, so if it's a relationship that you want to salvage, and I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it ended well, and they said they want to list, again in the
Right,
future.
right,
We wouldn't do that, but
right. Yeah, but if they're
but if it's
jerks,
somebody that you absolutely loathed working with,
oh yeah, we can
and
always
you're
talk
like, just
about
give me
that.
my money
Oh
back.
yeah, we can talk about that. I have done that to people that are jerks. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have a jerk, trust me, we can work with the jerks. I have no
Okay.
problem.
You jerks, talk to other jerks.
I don't really care. I mean, jerks are jerks. I just get rid of them. But yeah, no, but if you try to save a relationship, don't do that. Trust me, it never is good. I've never seen it be good. Mm-mm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But what I never will do is unconditionally terminate. That's what I won't do. Because I always tell people there is no cancellation because there is none in your listing agreement. It only says conditionally terminate. So that's what I will never do is unconditionally terminate. And by the way, when people come to you and say they want to unconditionally terminate, they are talking to another agent.
Yeah, it's very specific.
Yeah. No real person out in the world knows what the hell the difference is between conditionally and unconditionally terminate. Most agents don't know the difference between the two. So yeah, exactly. So do you think a person knows the difference? They don't. That means someone is giving them the verbiage, helping them write an email to tell them what to say to me. And then they're going to get my SmackDown email because I like my SmackDown. Yeah, because there is no cancellation. And so I cannot ever conditionally terminate anytime because you could search my entire record. Actually, ever since I've ever been a broker, I have never unconditionally terminated. I will not do it. It is a violation, in my opinion, of that listing agreement because it does not say cancellation. Now, are there other things we could do? Sure. Like I can conditionally terminate if I so chose, which really pisses people off, or they could pay the full, they could pay me my full, earned commission, and then I will release them at the termination. I will terminate it immediately. Or if they're nice people and we just want to rewrite the agreement or something, sometimes they terminate it early, rewrite the agreement. There's plenty of things we can work around and do. We can always work with people. Sometimes they get people to give us a referral fee and then we terminate it. There's things always we can do. It's not that we're not willing to work with people, but I'm never going to unconditionally terminate. Just never going to happen. And I just don't want any of you to write these because, first of all, they get very convoluted very quickly and they should never be processed by anybody but me. So, any questions on that? So on these things, that's the only thing that really you should be changing. That's why I think that this is really probably the only thing in modification that should be used for, truly, is really these two things. And the price, you could do the price, but I wouldn't even do this on the modifications or listing agreement because frankly, I don't like them looking at this whole section about cancellation and all this. I don't like them to even look at that. So, do you know what I mean? Like, why even let them know that's a thing? So for me, I would much rather them go to the MLS status change form. So this is a question I get a lot of times. If you're doing a price change, just do a status change form. It's in writing and they sign it and we sign it. This is perfect. And it's not an MLS change. You're not modifying your listing. They're not looking at cancellation on that thing. And this is MLS. So it doesn't look like, oh my God, I have the right to cancel. Oh, I can do this. No, because people get a little snarky and they start thinking they can do things. They start talking to other people. If we're changing days on market, this is the one. And it looks so like, who wants to even read this? TOM, they don't even know what any of this stuff is. Conditional, blah, blah, blah. They don't know, understand. Also, you guys don't be changing these dates either. Hey, Linda, status changed, withdraw conditional. Don't be doing that. I would never change that on this form either. I would only change that on a modification to listing. Just so you know. But this is the one I would be using for price changes right here. Okay, so price changes, use the status change form. And anything about commission, you have to use the modification to listing agreement. Now, one other thing, because we still have another minute or two. Yep. I'm going to tell you, let's say that you have, you had an agreement with Maria, and then it was 2.5%, but we had some things during inspections, and then as it works, of course, buyers and sellers take away from your commission. And so they changed the commission from 2.5 down to 2 again, right? I don't work for it either, but someone else did that, right? So then you need to go back and modify 2 things. You need to modify seller's broker to buyer's broker. So you got to go in here and do this modification, seller's broker to buyer's broker. Okay. So you're going to go in here and modify this to change the fact that you brought down the commission from 2.5 to 2. Everybody sees that? And then what else you have to modify? You got to modify the listing agreement again. Because now you're back to 2, and now the total commission is back to 5. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you'll be down to 2, but you're still at 5.5. So we're going to look to collect 5.5, which is great for us as the listing side. We're getting 3.5. But I don't think your seller will be all too excited when at closing we're trying to collect 3.5. Yeah, that's kind of a little slim shady. So you're going to have to do, if there's a change in the commission, as the game is moving on, you have to do 2 modifications. if we're on the list side. Modification to the buyer's broker, seller's broker to buyer's broker, and then modification to the listing again.
Is there any, have you come up with any way that we can, with full transparency with our seller, have the fluid, to be fluid? When we say to the seller upfront, look, we're gonna shoot with full price offers, we wanna be able to pay that 2.5 to the buyer's broker. But if we bring in that low offer, you know, you have the ability to negotiate and drop it, but we're just gonna have to modify it every time. Any options on this?
Not really. The problem is that if you don't modify it, it's gonna get screwed up at closing.
Not like additional attorney language. we can
No,
put
because
in.
again, they want to see these forms at closing. That's the problem, right, Jill? We see the closing wants to see the compensation form. That's the problem.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we had something simple, like we all want simple. I love an easy button, better than the next guy, trust me. But really the problem, and I'm gonna stop my share for a second, the problem is that closing wants to see those forms.
No worries.
So that's why every time you change it, you can't just say, oh, he sent me a text. Well, closing is not gonna feel good about that text message. Closing needs to see the form. Because they're gonna pay it out based upon whatever the last form signed was. And, you know,
Protect.
yeah,
Down the road.
yeah, it's not, yeah, exactly. Also too, guys, remember, there's a little tiny nasty little word. It's called audit.
Yeah.
And when we get audited, essentially you're getting audited. So, yeah, everyone's like, oh crap, I didn't think of that. Yeah. No, yeah. So those are all the things. That's why we're such sticklers about compliance. Like, for example, let's say you changed your name to an LLC, but you didn't change it in WPR. WPR. Oh my God, DBPR. I don't know what that. Didn't change it on the radio. Yeah, DBPR. We cannot pay you in the business name because DBPR does not recognize you like that. Now, I know almost probably 90% of other brokerages probably do pay you in a business name without it being registered with DBPR. And if they get audited, oh my God, what a mess that is. Let me tell you. And it's also a mess for you. That's the problem because it just starts at the brokerage and then it's going to feed down to you. People don't realize that. So even though we seem to be the sticklers, we're protecting you. That's why we do it. It's to protect you guys because we do the things the right way so that you aren't going to get audited. Because when you get audited, guess what? You get back fees because now it's a time difference. And don't think the IRS is going to do that. Oh, they will. And then DBPR, you're doing business under name that's not your name because they look at an LLC as a different name. And you had to change that within 10 days. So that's the ugly rule that you're breaking.
And
So
you couldn't have multiple of these forms signed simultaneously because that would be a violation as well.
that'd be a violation because which commission are you doing? Although I like the idea, but no, you could do that with the buyer broker agreement because it's depending on the property that they're going to purchase, right? Because it's like a future agreement. But this is no, I mean, what is the seller
It'd be
agreeing
different-
to?
Yeah, different price range.
Yeah. I mean, you could have it prepared, but what is the seller going to agree to? You can only have one executed at a
Yeah,
time.
would be a.
Yeah,
like a-
exactly. Any questions
Oh.
from anybody?
Carrie,
Yes.
would it be possible for you to just add the wording into the seller's broker to buyer's broker agreement form, just automatic wording in there in the other section that says how if it's not a full price offer, the seller reserves the right to negotiate the above amount? Because we can still change it with the modification form, but we always add that wording in, and I'm just wondering, could you just automatically have that added in for us that we could delete if we wanted to?
I love that idea. But I wanted to say, I thought it was in there. Let me look at that real quick.
Unless I'm using the wrong form.
I don't think you
know.
are, Janice. Let me just take a quick peek if you don't mind. I think it's a great idea because the truth is, but you see, the point is that, and it says it everywhere that the commission is negotiable. And that's why I don't see it being a problem because it is negotiable. Seller to buyer's broker, where's seller? Compensation agreement, here it is.
It's that all over everything after that.
I know. Uh-huh. understanding between the subject prior to the all the alternation. Brokers' commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. In no event will the buyer's broker compensation exceed the amount of compensation the buyer. I mean, this is what it is saying, but to make it clearer, we probably could put it under other terms. But this
Yeah,
is
that's
saying,
we normally just add some wording in under other to say, seller is if the above is based on a full price offer, and if the price comes in lower, seller reserves the right to negotiate.
yeah,
Something
I could see if I can get that in there for you. Let me look into that. I like the
that
idea.
would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Great suggestion.
Will you guys all know if that's okay before we put it in? Start
Well,
with
I'm
it?
gonna see if I can have it
But
baked
it's
in.
only-
Yeah, it is okay to put that in. Yeah. Good point, Janice. Does anybody else have anything? I hope you guys got something from today.
I do have a question specifically regarding pictures. I know that we have as far as cancellation and we don't want to do that, but now that some things are sitting on the market longer or some people are, deciding to go temporary off market or expiring, is there any way to put that in that at least those costs would be covered?
That's a great question. I mean, I have seen people take a retainer fee, but it's hard on a listing, to be honest. Listings are tough because, it's still competitive to get listings. And so to say to a seller, if this doesn't sell by X amount of time, you owe me, my fee. Well, you know what you could do, Maddie? Just saying, it may not be popular. You could say to the seller, they pay for the photography and it's reimbursed at closing.
That's an idea.
I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be totally popular, but it's something that you could do. And at least it seems great because it's not saying like, we're penalizing you if it doesn't sell. We're like aiming like, so at closing, we reimburse you for your photography, we reimburse you for, I wouldn't do it on a luxury listing because you won't win it. But if you're doing lower price stuff, you probably could get away with that.
As she could, because my sellers pay for my photography on the lower end listings without, and I have no pushback. So she, and that's
Oh.
middle ground, that you should have no problem.
So Maria says on her lower listing, she has her sellers pay for it. So,
No,
Really?
yeah.
For
Mhm.
realtors, cost of business.
No, it's not always.
So something to think about. You could try to do that and you could say, and at closing, we'll be reimbursed it or whatever. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
How you said it?
Okay. It's not normally the way I like to do business, but
Well,
it's
let's be
just,
real though. In today's market, sometimes we have to adjust.
First one, go.
And everything is how you present, right? So if you're confident and positive and say, and great news, you get reimbursed for your photography, you get reimbursed for everything at closing and
okay.
right? It's all in how you present. But I don't do it on a luxury listing because you won't win it,
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
especially in your market. Anybody else? Well, I thank you all for joining me. I hope you guys all got something from today. And I will look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. I will be here putting it on the screen here, but you all can join via Zoom as well for our 2-1 buy down class with Chris and Heather. So have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.
What was that verbiage she gave on the BB, on the